Back around in July, I went to one of the first family reunions I've been to, the one that we've had in, gosh, about 20, 30 years, I think. And so it was in South Carolina, you know, where most of my family migrated from, and, or at least on my mom's side anyway. And so again, I hadn't seen many of these people in like 30 some years. And so cousins from all over the country. And so they'd come up and they'd see me and they're like, oh my goodness, you're the green lady. Oh, your mama would be so proud of you. And I'm like, yeah. Because it was really funny, but because that is how I was kind of presented in the media, which is great. But the real motivation behind all that work that I did in green infrastructure was really about how do you link current economic trends with local economic development, in particular job creation, period. That's what I did. And green infrastructure was the way to do this. And I'm really excited because the work that I started is still carrying on to this day. I co-founded Green for All, Bronx River Alliance, and of course founded Sustainable South Bronx. They're all doing great stuff. You know, good luck, God bless. I'm happy that's happening. Very proud of that. But I left Sustainable South Bronx back in 2008. For a bunch of reasons, but one of the reasons definitely was that, you know, I'm not sure if you noticed, but in the philanthropic world, female leaders aren't, and especially female leaders of color, are not supported at the same rate as men, in particular white men. And so regardless of how innovative and visionary, you know, those women happen to be. And you know, they share that, you know, that kind of, I think, standing even with the VC world, which should be a little different, but it's not. And, you know, it was almost like folks kind of felt that, you know, I didn't need, you know, anything else to do the great work that I've been doing all that time. And it was like, nah, I got bills, you know, mouths to feed and people to pay to do all this fabulous stuff that we're doing. And and it was interesting because at one point there was actually even a rumor that I heard at SVN the last time that I was here, that it was like, oh, she doesn't need any help, she's rolling in dough. And I was like, well, that's really unfortunate because it wasn't true. But anyway, but the thing is, it was interesting because it was almost as if I didn't need anything. And I could just happen to do things just because I was like that. And it was, my funding totally decreased, you know, the more quote-unquote famous I got. And that was a really difficult thing for me. And by the time I left Sustainable South Bronx in 2008, I was bringing in a good portion of my budget by going out and doing speaking engagements. And I knew that the second I left, that whoever the new ED was, because there wasn't this visionary founder in the lead, was going to do just fine, and that budget gap was going to go away right away. And it did. So then I went and I started my own consulting firm because, you know, I wanted to see, is the stuff that I'm doing, that I'm pioneering here in the South Bronx, is that going to be the kind of thing that we can really make, can it live outside? And it did. You know, I spent the last 5 years really learning, doing speaking, advising, having an amazing time understanding like the way things work. It's in particular, what are some best case scenarios for how do we increase economic diversity in low-income communities? And so now, guess what? I'm at it again. You know, so I'm still trying to work on how do you create economic wealth and well-being in low-income communities, but this time in particular, I'm using real estate development as that very practical tool, and as a way to increase economic diversity and, of course, create jobs to do that. And so, interestingly enough, you know, as I traveled around, both domestically and internationally, I noticed that there's really only two kinds of real estate development in poor neighborhoods. There's the kind that assumes that the place is going to get nicer, you bring in the creative class, and, you know, it starts to get gentrified, and the poor folks will be displaced. The other kind is something that I call a maintenance of poverty-level economics. And that's what happens when the only kind of goods and services and economic developments that are in that place cater only to the poorest of the poor people, period. So you'll see it in terms of the type of you know, instead of building things like that will help people build economic well-being, So you won't see banks or credit unions or things of that nature. You'll see things like payday loan places or pawn shops or things of that nature. Instead of having places where you could get affordable, decent food, you'll find plenty of junk food stores, fast food stores, things of that nature, lots of liquor stores, not any real stores, 99-cent store, things of that nature. And last but definitely not least, tons, and I do mean tons, of super highly subsidized affordable housing, which means who else is going to live in those places except the poorest of the poor? It's a concentration of poverty and all the things that are associated with it that I'm sure many of the people, if not every single last one of you in this room, is interested in helping to alleviate. So as I was thinking about this, a lot was going on in my head. I was like, well, was there a time, when there was this sense, within our communities, there was real economic diversity? And I thought about what happened as a result of the unintended consequences of integration. And so, yeah, Black communities at one point had to be racially segregated by law, but they were economically diverse. And so it was not uncommon for a Black doctor to live near a Black janitor. And so there was this sense of social cohesion and economic stability, within these communities. And also, last but definitely not least, a sense of aspiration and hope, which is often lost in poor communities. Because again, we're not taught this. When you're born into a poor community, people generally, if you happen to be one of the bright ones, you are taught that you should leave those communities. You are taught to measure success by how far you get from them. But what does that leave? So when integration happened and folks were able to move where they wanted, what did that do for the folks that were left behind in those communities? And where did it leave them? And so as I thought about this, I thought, well, the same way that real estate, because that was a real estate play, just like everything else, how can real estate development be used as a platform to create the kind of social, environmental, and economic change that it currently is used in poor communities to either displace poor people or to continue to concentrate poverty and all the ills associated with it? And I thought, yes, there is. And because of some of the I don't know what I did with my thingy-majiggy. So the nice thing is that as I was thinking about using real estate development as this platform, in my travels around the country, I noticed in almost all post-industrial cities that I've been in, that there is actually a particular topography to the way that the communities are planned and how they're structured. And in poor neighborhoods in particular, what that yellow area, that's the residential area. The blue area is the part where the manufacturing was or some kind of industry was. And there's always like this little hinge area in between. And so the interesting thing about that in that little hinge area, not a lot of things go on there. Zoning doesn't really fit, and it's a really interesting thing. However, if you look in the totality of those communities, and if you look hard enough, you will find assets that can be supportive of that community's health and well-being. And so, for example, I didn't know, I've happened upon, but completely by accident, the waterfront in our community that then was able to become the first waterfront park that my neighborhood had in 60 years, and was then also the impetus for creating a $50 million first phase project for South Bronx Greenways. Those things had come into the community simply by looking and recognizing that we had this asset called the waterfront. We also have great access in terms of public transportation. So those are the kind of really cool things that we want to see more of happening in our community. And so in that little hinge area, if you think about that hinge area as the catalyst, as the place where great things can happen, in particular housing. So you've got mixed income housing, not just housing just for straight up poor people, but when I think about this neighborhood, my neighborhood, I'm not the only kid, that went to PS 48 and I-74 that did good for herself. There are plenty of us, but most of us, again, taught to measure success by how far we got away from the neighborhood. We also need to make sure that we're building the kind of housing that does attract people, who have higher incomes, who could be moving outside of our community, and making sure that it's nice enough for them. And then manufacturing and education, because in particular in terms of the poorest people in the community, education is what keeps them from moving up and out of their economic scene. So you got to have a particular, accessible job creation and looking at what are the new economic trends. And we've definitely identified manufacturing in the 21st century. I'm so glad Eileen Fisher is doing this work and developing this project, because manufacturing, in particular in apparel, outdoor apparel, but also other types of apparel, is really going to be very, very important going forward into the 21st century, as many manufacturers are starting to lose their appetite to do things internationally. But then also there's technology and also manufacturing around food. Not so much growing it in inner cities, because that can be costly, and the numbers didn't quite match up when we looked at them. But there's plenty other stuff out there that you can do some great things on. And of course, public space. You want a beautifully designed public sphere. So that does include the parks, the greenways, all that fabulous stuff to make it, and it's also a great democratizer as well. And commercial and retail, right now, there's still plenty of money in poor communities like the South Bronx. There's South Bronx all over the place. And guess what? People leave their communities in order to get things that you cannot find in the community. The way a dollar circulates in poor communities, it does it one time there. In a healthy community, it can do it 14 times, at least. And so developing places where people can spend money where they want to, cafes, bookstores, things of that nature, that's what we really have to work on developing more of as we go forward. And we also need to have very particular appropriate economic development as we go forward in order to create that economic game plan. It has to be accessible economically and also uplifting, too, for the people that are doing it. And really, we've noticed that one of the biggest drivers is technology. And so the Fab Lab is a project we worked on with MIT back when I still ran Sustainable South Bronx, and this was our first iteration of that. The Fab Lab is just short for Fabrication Laboratory. It is a digital way to do 3D customization, rapid prototyping. And this one was brought there is because when you link personal computers with fabrication machines and know the software, you're only limited by your imagination and obviously the capacity of the fabrication machines that you can build stuff with. Right now, rapid prototyping is used for everything from clothing design and manufacture to organs for human transplant. And it sounds really Star Trek-y, but it's absolutely not. It is the way to go. The reason why we brought this to our community was because we wanted people there to remember that they were creators and inventors in their own right. And to get that, to have that tricked out NASCAR trailer with all this equipment was a way to also help people think and challenge how they thought about the community and the things that were in it that were often considered garbage, but then use it specifically as a raw material. So these wooden pallet boxes, some enterprising young folks that went through the Fab Lab realized that they were made of some pretty decent hardwood. And if you pulled them apart and lashed them together, and understood how to use the software design, then you could create this kind of furniture. And it was a really nice little, totally legal side hustle for some of the folks that did this project. So again, a really early tech iteration. But as we start moving more into this multi-platform world and more into the digital economy, we realize that everybody wants everything they do to work on absolutely everything. I mean, we are firmly in the tech economy right now. Everybody's there. It doesn't matter who you are. And so but at the same time as our devices, or we want them to work everywhere and become more diverse as we go forward, we're also becoming way more diverse as a country. Wait, one more second. So this is the kind of thing that, frankly, nobody wants to see, either consumers or producers in terms of their technology. So we've got all this stuff going on right now, but as we grow and as devices get more diverse and people are expecting more and more and more from them, our population is also growing more diverse too. And 2040 is that magic year when America will no longer be majority white, according to demographers. We passed that in, we passed that in 2011 in the 23 counties in the New York City area. So it's no need to be afraid or anything like that. But so we're there. And honestly, and you might not know because it's you guys look like you go to a lot of conferences, that America's demographics really are changing. You know, like personally, I tend to feel like a chocolate chip in a bag of rice when it comes to most conferences that I go to. And it's frankly, this is a little better smattering than I see at most, but you know, it's still kind of out there. And, but we've got to figure out, like, especially, sorry, in terms of the technology sphere, you know, we've got plenty of people who need work as we go forward in general. And in technology, again, as we move further toward that, companies, I think, are missing out a lot. Tech and other companies, not just tech companies, are missing out because on potential consumers, because their products are being designed by people who actually don't fit that changing demographic. And so they're representing a shrinking portion of the population going forward. And so, but also understand that as America's urban areas are becoming more dense, more multilingual, more money is flowing through them. And it may come in the form of things like this, but it's still moving there. And this is just a very informal sketch about how these things work. However, but in neighborhoods like this, you'll find that a third of the people under 50 don't have bank accounts, but 2/3 of the people over 50 have smartphones. So in order to effectively find opportunities, you know, in these markets, companies kind of need to understand what that market actually is. And but when you think about our high school, our education system to begin with, is it producing the type of student that tech and other companies are looking forward to fill out their business model and bring on their team and add value? And the answer is, unfortunately, not necessarily. And there's actually a New York City, a guy who's running for a mayor in New York City, who one of his big platforms is that he's going to work to reduce barriers to immigration, specifically for engineers. So I'm just saying. So, but as we deal with the fact that, and he's a tech guy, so that's what happens. So, but when we deal with these factors, that there's a increasing diversity of devices, increasing diversity in our population, and underrepresented workforce, you know, listen, I'm not here to try to fix the educational system at all. But I do want to open up possibilities for the tech sector in particular, produce better, more reliable, and more relevant products. And I also want to see more people employed and transform communities in the process, because I believe that the best form of social service is actually a job. Imagine that. So with that, one of the things we're doing is developing a social enterprise called Startup Box South Bronx. And it's a technology education and entrepreneurship program that really is designed to increase the opportunities for people in the South Bronx to be a part of the tech economy. Because the whole idea that there is a digital divide, you know, that people don't have access to technology, it's just not true anymore. The divide is between being a producer or being a consumer. We're big-time consumers, and we want to move people out of that level right there. And it's going to be a part of, you know, it's not a part of the Department of Homeland Security. It's a part of my new nonprofit. I can't get enough, of course. The Hometown Security Laboratory. It's a project of that, and we're basically a great, big, fabulous R&D firm that's going to be working on projects like this. And we're developing the kind of culture that's going to make all these things happen. From speaker series and seminars, we worked with young kids at a local high school a few weeks ago, or excuse me, last year, went in them, taught them coding, and really they had apps on Google Play within a few weeks. It's really pretty incredible going forward. We actually started the first Bronx Tech meetup. We thought we were going to be able to have it in my office. Turns out that we had to rent the local gymnasium at the high school because there were way more people who wanted to come and be a part of it. But the really exciting thing is that this last summer we had the pleasure of working with one of our advisory board members who happens to run, Nate Altschul, who runs the games development at Nickelodeon. And we did a pilot program for a quality assurance program at Nickelodeon, because right now everybody wants everything multi-platform on their games, right? And so most of Nickelodeon's work is actually outsourced, but what they wanted to do was see is like, could we do some of this domestically? So we addressed the talent base right where it was, because the whole idea is like, when you build a game, it's got to be tested, right? When you build any software, that's what happens. But why couldn't we try to build that stuff right here and right now? So we went into the local community, got kids, a couple from high school, just graduated from high school, a couple of them, one had had some training in computer software in school, one graduated with a degree. And our goal was to make sure that what they produced was way more valuable than just the amount of training that they got, and they passed that test. They performed the needed task, communicated well with their employer at the time, and Nickelodeon took a very low-risk step into diversifying, the software world domestically. And now they've got their foot in the door. Doing QA is actually an incredible entry-level job into the software industry, because the bottom line is people need jobs right now. Developing this kind of market is the kind of thing that we want to see happening, because, as much as we want to say education is the key to everything and everybody's got to go to college, it's not necessarily the case. These are actually more than living wage jobs that can provide this great kind of opportunity for folks. And also, they could very well be developing the app of the future. Why can't we have the next amazing, technological advances coming out of communities like the South Bronx and getting a start, this kind of entry-level start in the world of QA. And so the pilot launched in September, and now we're looking for new clients and raising money to fit out a lab with every device out there going back for several years, because again, you got to test it on absolutely everything. And we want to do it, why? Because of this. It's a $30 billion global market. And we would like to shave a little bit back and do some insourcing to support underserved communities right where we are. And so in the meantime, because we realized that we'd be able to take some of this off a software developer's plate and be in the same time zone or same city, as a matter of fact. And so, but we're starting with the games, but we want to move into all sorts of software development. And we're looking for about $250,000 in charitable donations to just get our lab set up, hire the QA lead and the sales team that we need to make it happen. And then as we research an investable model, for what the business is actually going to look like as it grows. And we know that it's not like a justice thing or an equality thing, even though that's all fine and dandy. This is about a creative productivity thing. It's about going where the people are, where the markets are going to be, building those folks in order to be a part of the future that's out there. And, and guess what? There's room for everybody, even white guys, as you can see. And believe me, I think it's totally fine. I have a white guy at home, and he's a really, really good guy, and I will definitely be keeping him. But the bottom line is diversity supports innovation. It absolutely supports it. And if you don't have it, things will just stifle. So we want to see a whole lot more of that going forward. And so when you think about how real estate development is used right now or not used in poor communities. Like this is the area that I showed you a little bit before, and that we're going to be, is a former juvenile detention facility, and we're going to be competing to redevelop that whole site. But on that little hinge area, which is a really, right now, because it sat in that little funky spot, nothing really happened on it, except people now know, people have always known, that because there's not anything really going on there, that it was a great place to go at night when the trucker wanted to pick up a prostitute. That was a great lonely place to do it. But it wouldn't be that easy to do it on a place like, if it looked like this, with all that ground level retail and kind of stuff happening that would make life difficult for like the negative aspects of life to happen. And it's not, because it really is not about creating just this one little project so it's really sweet and cute and everybody gets to feel good about themselves. No, that's not what it's about. It's about raising the bar for what passes for economic development in poor communities, and bringing people along with it as we go forward. That's what it's about, and making those kind of investments as it goes forward. And the idea that this little lonely strip of land could turn into something like this, and that this piece of, a bit of a icky little property right now could turn into, what is going to be a for-profit incubator and co-working space for startups in the South Bronx. As we move forward and develop community capacity in the tech world to do that stuff, that's the kind of thing that we want to be going forward with. Because I know, like you, I too am very impatient. This is one of my favorite quotes in the world because it speaks to, I think, where we all are. You know, and if you believe that the best form of social service is a job, and if you believe that there is something wrong with the racial divide that exists, you know, in terms of funding and investing, in particular in minority communities and women, and especially women of color, okay? And if you see the value of diversity and innovation, then join me, and let's put our money where our mouths are. And you know, support minority and women-led ventures here at home and do it with money or other people's money, because I'm sure y'all got friends, and build something different, something other than yet another tribute, you know, to all of our failures, and let's build something fabulous, monuments to hope and possibility, and I am there with you. Thank you very much. Thanks.
And if you have a question, say your name and organization first. No need to describe what your organization does. And if you have a comment, please feel free to share a comment, but keep it short so we can hear from as many of you as possible. So who has a question or a comment? Way in the back.
Hi, I'm Karen Tumulty with Grayston Bakery, and I handle our open hiring, so you are ringing my bell. I'm ready to cross-stitch the best form of social service on a sampler.
I know you guys know that.
My question to you, and it comes up in my work every day, is dealing with the prejudice around incarceration.
Yes.
In community, particularly outside of what are considered traditional entry-level jobs. My mind is always blown that people say, I will put that food in my mouth. You eat my brownies. We all gorged on them they're made by criminals. Yeah. A lot of my employees are felons, but if I asked you to hire them to come run your tech system, right, there would be pause. So I'd love to hear your take on that.
Well, honestly, that is one of the reasons why we chose this kind of work. And we did it specifically because we know, in particular in this era of the criminalization of the criminal after he's done his or her time, that we have to address that. That's why I moved it, that's why I did the green work, that's why I'm looking at this. So we've actually identified this in building out, you know, our own businesses in this way, and bringing in the kind of companies who value that kind of thing. We're probably not gonna work with a bunch of people, but we are gonna work with plenty. And that's where we are, because we have to, because that is absolutely, it's one of something I'm incredibly passionate about as well. But we're putting it out there and doing it in a way where we're helping folks transition through gainful employment, dignified work.
Well, if I can help with open hiring,
awesome, we'd love to hear, totally. Mine as well. Hello.
Hi, Majora. My name is Malachi Leopold with Left Brain, Right Brain Productions. And the question that I'm actually very curious about, I was having a conversation with someone here yesterday about the difficulty that a lot of people seem to have with putting as much passion and energy into poverty right here in the US versus internationally. So I'm curious from what your experience has taught you about why that seems to be a problem and how you've addressed it.
Well, I'm still addressing it, and I think it's much easier for folks to focus on poverty when they don't have to see it in their own backyard, because that's closer to home. I think it is I think it is that simple. You know, and that's why those of, you know, so working on specifically domestic poverty, you know, and you know, we've got the new Jim Crow, you know, which is our prison industrial complex. You know, we have, you know, which destroys communities inside and out. And, you know, and the way that we do poverty, you know, here has also just done some really awful things. And so it is going to provide, we do have to look for very innovative models to do that. But yeah, I mean, it is very disturbing to me that the same people, who I know and many love, will literally say things to me, well, it's, the poverty here is different. It's just so much, like they're really bad off here. And it's just like, you wouldn't have these people in your home. So, but whatever, I'm sorry. I'm just not going to go there. I know, but and it's, I think, I'll get off my soapbox in a second, but I think it really is because we've dealt not at all with race or class, seriously, in this country, and ever had real discussions about it. Yeah. I mean, frankly, it's why I felt like I needed to tell you before, like what it's like to be a really innovative, visionary leader who has a lot of trouble getting funds. Like, y'all need to know that and do something about it.
Thank you very much, Majora. That was a great talk. And I don't know about you that were sitting back there, but when she walked up there, she got up in the front of this stage. This is a 3-foot stage, and she climbed it right from the front without having to use her hand or anything like that. So I was really impressed right from the get-go. That was really amazing. Because for those of us
just so you know, the last time I saw you, I was probably 30 pounds heavier.
Yeah.
So there you go.
For those of us over 50, that was really an impressive feat. So
cool.
I knew it was going to be.
I worked hard at it.
Thank you very much.
Glad you noticed.
I want to say that the issue of race and class has been brought up over and over again now, and I think you are very fortunate in the fact that you've almost elected Bill de Blasio to be your next mayor in the city, and I think it's going to make a huge impact. And with that in mind, I'm planning on running for mayor, actually, for Washington, D.C. Because
wait, did you say your name?
Andy Shalal, on the same idea, because I think we, too, have the same issues that you all have, and I think it's happening all over the country. We are a tale of two countries. We are a tale of two cities. In Washington, D.C., we are #1 in the number of bars per capita. We've got over 2,000 restaurants, and many are opening up. In about a 10-block row, we have about 72 restaurants that have opened up in the last year and a half. Wow. It's really quite remarkable. We're also #1 in bike trails. We're #1 in the most livable city. People are coming to the city in droves. Right. We're also #1 in wealth disparity in the entire country. Mm-hmm. 1 out of every 5 people in Washington, D.C. is below poverty, and half of those are below half of that. And 1 out of every 3 children in Washington, D.C. goes hungry every night. These are invisible things that we don't see, and we push them off to the side, pretending they don't exist. Where, unfortunately, our political process has been mired in corruption and cronyism and furloughs and you name it, all of these things that have really taken the focus away from the issues that I think people care about. So I felt I can't just sit aside and watch this happen. I feel like we could do better. They always say we elect the people we deserve, and I think we deserve much better. Thank you.
Well, good luck to you.
Hi, Majora. Sarah from Sweet Riot. Good to see you again, and welcome back. So I guess I love what you're doing, and I've always loved your energy and just how you are constantly trying to catalyze change. So while we're here at SBN, I wanted to hear again specifically what you need, how much you're fundraising, and what other needs could this community give you?
We are looking for about $250,000 specifically to ramp up our, no, not even to ramp it up, to get it going, to build out the space, to buy all the equipment that we need, all the gear that goes back a couple years, to hire a QA lead and also a QA salesperson, who's going to be the one drumming up business. And then what we're also going to need is the kind of expertise to make sure that this is this investable model, because we do believe that it's going to get way bigger than our project, and we're cool with that. We want it to be, but we want there to be at least a place where there's going to be some very serious social, if people are looking for social impact for their investment, we want whatever structure that we have to be the best that it can possibly be in terms of the business development. And that, I'm not quite sure how to do that, but I'm sure that would be the kind of thing that would be really helpful going forward, because they're in major markets, not even major, everybody, is developing tech centers all over the place. And if we can do that as a way to literally create jobs, accessible jobs in areas where they need it, that could be a game changer in this country. It would get people into finally we'd have an economic boom that everybody can participate in. Finally, that's what I'd like to help facilitate, and I'd love some help in doing that.
Hi, I'm Julian Chender, and I just wanted to say that I'm really impressed with how you're using physical space and real estate development as the lens through which to bring up this community. And I wanted to ask, between the startup box and the waterfront park, what's your process for design, and is there a level of community engagement there?
Oh God, yeah. In a beautiful way. I mean, we had to start small with everything, because frankly, when we started the waterfront park, folks didn't even realize we had a waterfront. They wouldn't believe us because they wouldn't go down there, because no one did. And so it was kind of slow, but basically the design that the park is right now was one that was created with people who were just like, went through the process with us and literally created what they wanted. As far as the tech thing, first what we did was we went out and we surveyed the landscape in terms of where could the jobs be. And then we went back to folks. Because it was just like, look, I know that there are tons of people who really think that, who would love to be able to grow food to feed the masses in urban areas. I think I don't think that there's going to be jobs in that, period. So we went and we specifically identified, we went through a whole process, like exactly how many jobs could we get out of this thing? What's the market look like? Can we shave a bit of it off to bring back to our communities? And that's what people listen to. So it wasn't like this pie in the sky kind of thing, like, oh, we like stuff, whatever it is, knowing that there weren't jobs in it. Because I think one of the most horrible things you can do to people is lead them down a road and tell them that they can, by some way, that you give them training for something, and good and daggone well there are no jobs in it. That's offensive, and it's so cruel. And so that's why we went to people after we knew what the process is. And so we started our own advisory board. We have great relationships with many, 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 both schools and different organizations within the communities, and that's how we roll.
Hi, Majora, Larry Leon. Welcome back. In the last few weeks, I read something about, I'm in commercial real estate, in the last few weeks I heard that crowdfunding, some laws have changed, and crowdfunding is now a possibility to fund equity in real estate, including going beyond qualified investors. Do you know anything about this?
I don't, but I've heard about it, and I'm dying to find out a bit more.
Yeah, the community can own their own buildings.
Yeah. Thank you.
Hi. Oh, wow.
Oh, hi.
That's disturbing. I wanted to acknowledge, I don't know a lot of the details, but I did see the articles this summer that were obviously, just felt very hurtful. And I wanted to thank you for your courage and continuing on and to set an example and develop models that you believe in and can show us the way. And even today, thank you very much. That's all.
Aw, thank you. Thank you.
Hi, Majora. Keisha Cash, Jolly Adventures. Thank you for your talk. I consider you a mentor and a guider, and you know this. Can you speak a bit more about the innovation you're seeing in minority communities? Oftentimes, I believe folks don't consider sort of innovation and minority to sort of stand in the same place. So I'd love to hear more about the innovation.
Girl, I'm from the birthplace of hip hop. Okay, it is a cultural innovation that has gone world frigging wide, and unfortunately, there's like a teeny weeny minority of people who've really truly benefited from it. And so creativity we got in like everywhere. Innovation we have. It's all about the digital divide. It is not about access anymore. It's not. I mean, people have so much power in their little smartphones. You know, those big, huge computers when they first started, please, that's nothing compared to what people can do with that. But if they don't know how to use it, if they don't know how to code, if they don't know how to program it, if they don't know how to do all that stuff, then they're just going to be stuck being a consumer. So that's why developing startup boxes, and we want to see those spread around the country. And I've already got like a bunch of folks who are really interested, you know, in being the community where that happens, you know, from Phoenix, you know, to Philly, to all sorts of places, and it's really awesome. It's there. It has always been there, but if you don't, you know, it's sort of like, I keep hearing there's like a bunch of folks in the, you know, in many different worlds, but I think particularly like a lot of VCs, or some major VCs, you know, have often talked about the meritocracy that is technology. You know, and anybody could get funding to do anything, and it's actually not true. Because if you don't have access to the training and to the resources and to the mentors, then guess what? You're not going, any step along that way will put you back. So creating new opportunities for this to happen, making sure we've got real tech centers, not just in where the specified, you know, old boys networks or young boys network is actually, you know, taking place in terms of that economy, but you've got more than that, then it can blossom. But we do need folks to support, fund it, invest in it, make sure that we're talking about it so that it's not just, again, another economic boom that goes right by our communities once more. And then we start to wonder, well, why did it happen? It's like, it happened because we let it happen. So we don't have to do that. We really don't. And, you know, and I expect greatness from this community. So don't disappoint me.
Come on, Mama. So I hear that I have the last question. First of all,
okay.
I love you.
Hi, Rose.
We had a love fest in the hallway, so this is just to be continued, me and you, man. Women of color being invested in, women of color being seen on the edge of innovation. Mm-hmm. Can you talk about what is the opportunity to transform? Because I'm with you. I am a nonprofit refugee, executive leader, right? So I would love for you to talk about what's the paradigm shift that we, as the leading the way community, need to undergo to support the opportunity for innovation to come in the form of you?
I mean, it's just, when you think about it, why would you leave a whole section of the population that could be providing really valuable insights into what the next new big fabulous thing could be, simply because we happen to be women of color, or white women, or, you know, people of color, whatever. That's what happens. Diversity supports innovation. It equals innovation. And not having a diversity of voices literally being able, and because we're willing, but we're not always able because we're often not given the opportunities to do that. And so it is about the money. I'm gonna be straight up, it is. And why is it that when we stop and think about, you know, if you just look at the stats, you know, we can talk about, you know, the fabulous things that are happening, you know, in communities of color, but why when we make investments in them, it's actually not to the folks that are in those communities. It's to organizations that come often from outside to do it. Why wouldn't we make better investments in real people who are doing the real work in their community? And if they're not at the top of their game, why don't we work to make sure that they are? Now, it might be a little more work. I'm sure it is. But why would you leave that talent to not just leave it to lie fallow in a field when all it needs is a little nurturing?